I was roused from my dozing by an uncomfortable burning sensation in my right eye, only to realise that I was nodding off with my cigarette burning in an ashtray nearby, and the smoke was trailing up into my eye. Rubbing it, I yawned and picked up the cigarette to finish it off. My desk clock glared at me, telling me it was 2:15 AM. I decided I should probably try to get a couple of hours worth of shut-eye. Going on like this every night wasn't doing me any good. I was running out of coffee too. The light from my PC was pretty bright, and I had to squint as I closed out of Google after having no luck finding anything out of the ordinary on the tunnels. They were a couple miles long, far underground. An abandoned sewage network in Warwick which hadn't seen use in about 7 years. That was all I found. They were always nothing special. Until now, of course. I like to call myself a freelance journalist. Probably not a very good one by the standards of most, but I get by. I've always scraped along on the lesser known happenings in the city, nothing major. I had run into a case that really had my interest though. After 7 years of relevant silence and abandonment, the tunnels had claimed 3 teenagers well known for messing about in there, doing graffiti and smoking and doing all the things teenagers do when they find a nice place where they're left alone. Now, they were gone. The parents had filed missing persons reports after 48 hours as per the standard, and so the police had started poking around and hadn't found much of anything. I had heard about it from my downstairs neighbour in the apartment building I lived in, and was instantly intrigued. So I did some sniffing around myself. I managed to locate the tunnels and found 2 entrances that weren't closed off in different parts of the city. I took a drive down to the one off Wisham Street, down in a public park sector. Upon arriving, a couple of police officers stood outside the entrance, and they looked my way as I approached. "Excuse me, sir, you shouldn't be down here," said the dark-haired, burly one on the left. "My apologies, officers, I didn't know anyone was here," I replied. "That's alright, this area is closed off for now. It's currently under investigation." "I did hear about that. Some kids disappeared down there. That's never happened before, has it?" "Sorry sir, we're not inclined to discuss anything related to the case. We just need you to move along and let us handle this." "I just wanted to look around a little myself, see if I could find anything that may help." "That's our job, sir. We will handle it. Please leave the area," said the officer, firmly this time. I decided to give it up for now as they weren't going to budge, and as I was leaving, they even mentioned the other entrance and told me that was being watched as well, and warned me not to go there. I cursed a little when I was back in my car. It was one of the reasons I had always avoided cases of intrigue. They were usually more troublesome than anything else, and the cops always got in the way. I went home and ended up spending a few days scraping around online, falling asleep at my desk. I even checked the city's public records and nothing odd came up. Eventually, I hit a stroke of luck after finding out the name of one of the parents of the teenagers. Amelia Gardner, mother of Errol Gardner, 14 years old. After finding their address listed in the phone book, I took the short drive down to Herwin, number 18 Regal Street. My knock on the front door was answered by a sullen, slightly greying woman probably in her late 40s. My first impression was that she seemed tired, just really tired. She looked at me without saying anything, so I spoke first. "Hi, I'm sorry to bother. Are you Mrs. Gardner?" "Yes, who are you?" "My name is Adam. I'm one of the people interested in the case involving the tunnels." "I figured that was what it was. I've already answered all the questions I can. The police are busy with it right now." "Yes ma'am, they are, but they don't seem to have had much luck as yet, and I'm only trying to help if I can. May I just ask a few questions?" I'll be out of your hair as quick as possible." She stared at me for a while, and I was sure she was going to start shouting and tell me to go away, but she sighed and let me into her home. "You can have a seat. Would you like some tea?" "Yes, please," I said, anxious to start questioning her, but also wanting her to be as comfortable to talk to as possible. I took a seat on the sofa and waited. After a few minutes, she came back with the tea and sat down. "What do you want to know?" she asked. I got my notepad out. "Your son, Errol, was one of the 3 teens to go missing down in the tunnels. Were you aware of the fact that he was hanging around there?" "Yes. He started going there a lot recently with that Jared and that girl Emma. Those 2 were always trouble since he met them. I told him many times that I didn't want him going there, but you know, teenagers do what they want." "I understand. Was he close friends with the other 2? "He's known Jared since elementary. As for the girl, she's a new one. I don't think either of the boys knew her long. She sure is a strange one," she finished. "Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?" "She just behaved really strange sometimes. There was a couple of times that Errol told me he thought he had seen her standing outside in the backyard late at night for some reason, looking at the house, but he was never sure. He always said he thought he had seen her, but when he checked again, she was gone. I never saw her myself, except when she came to meet them during the day. That is rather strange, and you can't think of any possibilities yourself, how they could have met?" "No, she just came up out of nowhere." Mrs. Gardner looked at me with tired eyes, and I could see a hint of sadness and worry under her calm disposition. "Do you think they're gonna find my boy Adam?" "Ma'am, I believe they're going to do the very best to do so, and I'm going to do the best I can too. They're not approving of me poking around, as you can imagine, but that won't stop me." "Thank you. I know you don't have to, but I appreciate your help all the same." Mrs. Gardner saw me out when we were done, and I went home to plan my next move. The bit about the strange girl, Emma, was intriguing. From the way it sounded, she had been the one to constantly influence the 2 boys to visit the tunnels. That made me curious indeed. I fell to thinking about how to gain access with the police watching the place. It was definitely risky, but it had to be done. It was the only way to find out more. I decided I would have to go at night. I wasn't exactly excited to go and visit some pitch black abandoned tunnels that stretch for miles in the dead of night, let me tell you. But I was at a brick wall otherwise. That night found me in my car at around 10 PM with a backpack containing 2 flashlights, a bunch of batteries, and a few other tools I thought I might need. I took my bolt cutters along as well. I was lost in thought in the dark quietness on my drive down to the entrance. I ran my plan through my head over and over as I went. Once I got there, I drove past the entrance casually, scanning the area, and as I expected, a police cruiser sat not far off. I glanced in at the windows and saw the officer inside, doing something on his phone. I drove a little further, around the block, and left my car in the parking area of a convenience store not far off. From what I could tell, the officer in the cruiser hadn't paid any special attention to me passing by. I took my backpack with all my equipment and made my way down the street. My nerves were a little unsettled by the darkness, and knowing what I was up to could get me in some real trouble. But this is what I was meant for. It had been a few days and the cops had found nothing. It was my turn. I clung to the side of the road, getting poked and prodded in the bushes there. But I managed to make my way past the police cruiser and down the dirt path to the tunnel entrance without incident. Standing there, looking at the rusty metal grate, a wind blew around me, howling softly down the dark void of the tunnel. I was even less excited now that I was here, but I went into professional mode. I once more made certain that no one knew I was here before I grabbed the bolt cutters out of my backpack and eyed the lock on the chain securing the grate to the wall. It was just your average bronze-coloured lock you would put on your gate. You would think they would take special precaution to make sure no one got in, but they probably didn't expect anyone would want to be creeping around there at night. They must have forgotten about me already. Good. I took a deep breath and clamped the clutters down on the bar of the lock. It snapped with a metallic clang that echoed down the tunnel. My eyes were shut tight as the sound drifted away into the darkness, and I stayed perfectly still, my ears on high alert for any sound telling me I'd been discovered. I waited a full 2 minutes, and when everything was still quiet, I breathed easier again. I took the chain off the grate as quietly as possible and put the bolt cutters back in my backpack. Apart from a slight metal screech that made my skin crawl, I managed to get the grate open before waiting a while again to make sure the sound hadn't given me away. I decided not to pull the grate closed behind me after I went in, as every noise was a risk and I had made enough already. After making some cautious progress away from the entrance, I turned on one of the flashlights. The beam revealed the murky dark grey of the tunnel walls circling all around me and the moist, slimy floor beneath my feet. Apparently, some water must have travelled through here due to overflowing and such, causing the floor to stay slimy and wet. I moved slowly to make sure I didn't slip. I checked my watch. It was just after 11 PM. If my flashlight wasn't on, it would be pitch black. So much so that I wouldn't have been able to see my own hand right in front of my face. Hence me bringing two in case something happened to one of them. After walking around for 15 minutes, I took a bend veering to the left, and the flashlight beam revealed an old maintenance room door. Interested, I stepped onto a metal platform to go have a look. It was terribly rusted, unused for who knows how long. I got a crowbar from my backpack and tried it on the door. I tried everywhere I could, straining to try and get some leverage and get it open, but I had to give it up. I wasn't going to be able to get it open, at least not alone. I figured that if it was that tightly shut, there wouldn't be anything of interest on the other side. I was putting the crowbar back when my heart stopped after I heard a sound somewhere down the tunnel. In my fright, I ended up dropping the crowbar, and it hit the metal platform I was standing on with a deafening clang that resonated right down the tunnel. I stood there for a while, mouth open, staring at the crowbar in horror, not moving an inch, barely even daring to breathe. The sound I had heard was the sound of footsteps, like someone running through a wet and sloshy part of the tunnel. And now, it was dead quiet again. My mind was racing. Who could it be? Surely the police wouldn't be searching here now. They had been at it for days and I was barely a 20-minute walk into the tunnel. Why would they still be searching this close to the entrance? I'm not afraid to admit, I was scared out my wits. The sound of the crowbar hitting the platform was still screaming in my mind. There was no way whoever it was didn't hear that. If I heard them moving, they definitely heard it. I eventually pulled myself together and picked up the crowbar, holding it tightly and listening. There was only silence. I had an internal battle of will, trying to decide whether to just leave and try again the next day or continue on. I was overpowered by the thought that I may not be able to return the next day after my breaking in was discovered in the morning. Also, what if that was one of the lost kids trying to find a way out? I would have risked all my effort being for nothing if I left there and then. Still shaken, I stepped slowly off the platform and back into the tunnel and continued further in. I know most people in their right mind would have been out of there so fast they would have been nothing but a blur. Maybe I was never in my right mind to begin with. I decided to stay on a fairly straight path, avoiding turning too much so I wouldn't have an issue finding my way back out. I was stopped in my tracks, my heart stopping with me again when I heard another noise echoing my way from the direction I just came from. I stopped and I stood absolutely still. Then I heard it coming from behind me again, running. It got louder and louder, and my eyes widened as I shone my flashlight down the tunnel, straining to see beyond the reach of it, where it was pitch black. I screamed in terror when a shape came barreling into view, so fast I couldn't see what it was. It blew right past me, knocking me hard into the wall of the tunnel and disappearing fast the way it had come. I sat there on the floor for a while after the sound died off, trying not to kill myself through hyperventilation. I can't describe the terror I felt. I won't even try. It must have been at least 5 minutes before I got up again and tried to move. My body was limp with fear and wouldn't cooperate. As I was getting up, I almost fainted when I heard more noises coming from the way back. I was sure it must have been some sort of animal. Maybe a feral dog. It had been so fast and it hadn't attacked me, so I couldn't be sure. I got up and began slowly tracking the other sounds I could hear. These were faint, not nearly as clear as what I had heard before, but as I got closer, I realized they were coming from below me somewhere. Shining my flashlight at the floor as I walked, I stared when I found a hatch in the floor leading down. There was no doubt that this was where the sound was coming from. I got the crowbar and decided to open it, my fear ebbing away, and was replaced by adrenaline as I felt that this was it. This was the reason why I had come here. I managed to fight the rusty hatch open and climbed down after seeing another tunnel section below after scanning with my flashlight. I made sure to remember exactly where the hatch was before walking. I rounded a corner and found myself in a suddenly open area, a sort of junction between tunnels with a round open space in between. I'm not about to expect anyone to believe what I saw as I stood there. It won't ever leave my mind. Such things shouldn't even be possible, but here it was. Laying on the ground towards the centre were two bodies. They lay very still, seemingly dead. Just beyond the beam of my flashlight, there was something moving near the bodies. I was horrified and scared out of my mind, but I couldn't move. That was when whatever was moving came into view. A horrible dark green mass was moving along the floor, its body pulsating as it moved, like a worm did. It made an awful clicking and gurgling sound as it did so. It seemed not to notice me standing there with a flashlight. It moved towards one of the bodies just as another one came into view, squelching along the ground. As I watched, the first one I had seen slithered onto the body of what looked like a young boy. I began retching as it started to push its way into the mouth of the boy. Paralyzed, I watched as it forced its way further and further into the mouth, and the body stretched and convulsed as it entered. After a lot of gurgling and shaking and more awful convulsions, the creature had disappeared entirely inside the body. That was when the body slowly stood up and staggered slightly before standing straight. The head turned slowly towards me, and its eyes opened. It was at this moment, seeing that and seeing the other creature entering the other body, that shook me to my core and sent me running. I flew back down towards the hatch, climbed up it at an incredible speed and slammed it down before running, screaming, back down the tunnel. For a few awful moments, I thought I may have been running the wrong way, further into the tunnel, but I ended up passing by the old maintenance door again. to my unimaginable relief, and kept running and running. I got to the entrance and fell out of it, scrambling in the dirt, truly believing a lumbering corpse would appear just to drag me back in. After I got away from the entrance, I could think of nothing else but finding my car and going home. I know I should have gone and told the officer in the cruiser what just happened, but he would never have believed me, and I would have been in a lot of trouble. By some good grace of the heavens, I managed to struggle up the road back to my car and drove home. My hands shaking on the steering wheel, my eyes wide and my mouth open in shock and horror. Whatever I saw that night is something that will stay with me until the day I die. But I don't want to take that awful secret to my grave, as I may never rest if I do. To make things worse, 2 days after that night, I found out that one of the missing teens had come home. Errol Gardner had returned home. It was reported that he was found to be sick, starving and catatonic, but alive. He didn't respond to any outside stimuli for the time being. Medical experts believe it was the shock and trauma, but you and I know better, don't we? I don't know what will happen now, but whatever that is, it's not what they think it is. That thing lying in that hospital bed is not Errol Gardner. Hey guys, and thank you for listening to the latest in the CreepyPasta series. Now, once again, surprise, surprise, this is another story by Thousand Thorns over on Reddit. So, please, if you haven't already, go show him some love on there. There'll be links in the description, and have a look at his other stories. If there's anything that you want me to cover, he gives me full reign on any story that he's written for me to delve into and narrate and do all my little funky stuff on. So if you like anything else, let me know. Scheduling has been a little bit lopsided this week, mainly due to the baby, so hopefully I'll catch back up, keep on track for next week. Can't promise anything, but if it does keep happening like this, what I'll do is I'll just change my scheduling and maybe drop down to 2 pastas a week. Hopefully it doesn't go that way, because I really enjoy doing these, but you know, priorities and all that. Links to the music by Mayu will be in the description below, also the image that's been used and the social media. So there's the Facebook page on there, and there's also the Discord, so if you want to join that, talk to me or talk with people that share the same interests as you for creepypastas and the spookier side of life. So if you want to jump in, then link will be in the description. Anyway, enough of me rambling. Thank you for listening once again, and take care.